Thank you, AIOC, respected madam and seniors and all my friends. So we are going to start our instruction course on minimally invasive glaucoma surgery. Our first speaker will be Dr. Vishwaraj, who will be talking on intraoperative gonioscopy. Over to you, Vishwaraj.
Good afternoon, everyone. Am I audible?
Yes, Vishwaraj. Share your slides.
Right now, we have to first open the PPT at our end and then share the screen. In that way, you would be able to see the PPT.
What's happening? Sure.
Good afternoon, everyone. Am I audible?
Yes, Vishwaraj.
Not able to share the screen.
Well, if you could tell us what is the issue, we can guide you with that.
My PowerPoint is on the desktop, but on the home screen, but I'm not able to share it.
Vishwaraj, open the PowerPoint and see, and then come to this place, and then
it's open, man.
Can you see the down button, green button, share screen?
Yeah, I can see that. I've done it, but I'm not able to.
Have you enabled Zoom and to share the slide?
Yes, ma'am.
Rejoin again.
I'll just rejoin, ma'am. Just a second.
सर पीपीटी फुल स्क्रीन नहीं करना, पहले डेस्कटॉप पे खोलना है, उसके बाद
यस सर, उन्होंने किया है, वो नहीं हो रहा है, वो बोल रहे हैं
वो फुल स्क्रीन पहले कर दिया होंगे.
ओके.
Good afternoon, Dr. Venkatesh.
Oh, madam. Good afternoon, madam.
Good afternoon.
Nice to see that background always.
Yeah. Yeah, it is safe. You can sit anywhere if you have the background.
Yes, Vishwaraj. Now it's yeah.
Yeah. Sorry for the trouble. Can you see my slides now?
Yes, Vishwaraj. Put it on slide screen and start.
Yeah.
Slide show and start.
Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to speak about intraocular gonioscopy, the art to master. I thank the AOS panel and my seniors, Dr. Venkatesh, Dr. Kavita, and Dr. Swati for this opportunity. So, as you coming to the introduction, intraop gonioscopy is a prerequisite for the most of the minimally invasive glaucoma surgeries, especially that in the ab interno procedures, you should learn the intraop gonioscopy before taking up the surgeries. So it's not just a simple task of docking a surgical gonial lens onto the corneal surface. It requires certain pre-procedural events or pre-procedural things that you'll have to practice before you take up the surgery. So coming to the definition, what has been described in FDA, it's MIGS is a IOP lowering surgery with the following characteristic that distinguishes itself from the traditional glaucoma surgery. So thing is, it should be minimally traumatic. Most of the surgeries involve an ab interno conjunctivus preserving approach so that you can plan for traditional surgeries in the future if needed. It has a high safety profile and it has a rapid recovery. And usually it is combined with the phacoemulsification or a cataract extraction. So these are some of the procedures or the instruments that are involved in the surgery, and these are the anatomical approaches that they take up, like the eye stent and all go through the trabecular bypass, the suprachoroidal space where the CyPass which was withdrawn, and the eye stent supra which is about to come up, and the ciliary body is involved in the cyclophotocoagulation and the micropulse. So according to Gilman et al., this is the the author's perception of the learning curve and also the safety profile of the procedures, where if you see the traditional filterings, where if you see the traditional filtering surgeries has a higher difficulty learning curve when compared to the relatively the newer surgeries, and diode has the least learning curve. Coming to the intraoperative gonioscopy, these are the available gonioscopes that are routinely used, where the Copis is the normal, the regularly used diagnostic gonioscopy, which involves the principle to overcome the critical angle. As you can see, the surgeon is standing on the temporal side. There is a light source in the other hand, and either you can use a binocular microscope or the operating microscope, and you visualize the angles through the binocular microscope. It gives a binocular image, and you can assess the angles appropriately. And coming to the surgical part, the Swan-Jacob is the most commonly used surgical gonioscope. As you can see, this differs from the normal diagnostic gonioscope that it has a notch over here. If you see the metal rim that ends abruptly over here, so that you can pass the instruments underneath. And there are a few additional modifications that has happened, which involves the fixation ring. You can see the fixation ring over here, and also the pendular handle, so that it holds the end where the globe can be rotated accordingly during the surgery. And there are certain prerequisites that you will have to do before you plan a gonioscopy, where the positioning of the patient and the microscope is important. So you have to turn the patient's head around 30 to 35 degree away from you, and you have to tilt the microscope around the same, around 30 to 35 degree towards you, and you'll have to keep the patient's head above the heart, like so. You'll have to tilt the OT table, so this prevents the blood reflex from the Schlem's canal. So you can see the head end elevation has been done over here. Okay, and this is a small video which shows the microscope tilt and also the patient's head movement. So you can see the surgeon is moving the patient's head away, and also the turning the microscope towards the surgeon. Okay. And compared to cataract surgery, the positioning of the surgeon and also the microscope, it shows the differences, where as you see, the elbows are more aligned with the flanks, and there is a little maneuver space in cataract surgery, whereas in mix you can see there is a increased working distance between the surgical field and also the surgeon kind of. And in cataract surgery, you will have more of bilateral bimanual intraocular procedure which has been done, and during mix, the one hand will always be extraocular, so it will be holding the gonioprism, and the other way will be intraocular. So you need a better coordination between the extraocular and the intraocular procedures. And in cataract surgery, there is minimal impact on the cornea, just the keratome and side port incisions, whereas there is frequent or continuous docking of the ocular surface during the mix. And red reflex is seen in cataract surgery, which due to the tilting of the microscope and the head rotation, red reflex will not be seen. And the iris plane also differs, where you have full access in the cataract surgery, and just a part of the iris is seen during mixed surgery. And the lens positioning. So this is the description, like where how to hold the lens. Like you have to hold the lens from the non-dominant hand, and and based on the laterality, you will have to decide whether to place your hand on the forehead or on the cheek, and you have to arch your fingers over the nasal bridge. And coming to the gonioscopy part as such, so I'll just to show you two small videos. This is Dr. David Davinder, who is operating on the GAT patient. So if you can see, there's a dollop of high viscous fluid like Healon GV, which has been applied over the gonio lens, or alternatively, you can apply it over the corneal. It prevents the corneal striae formation or the corneal damage during the procedure. And gently apply over the cornea. Or the second way is either like apply on the corneal surface and you focus on the nasal end of the trabecular meshwork, and you go ahead with the surgery. So there are a few tips of identifying the trabecular meshwork. It's either through the pigment, blood, or staining. The pigment is, as you know, the trabecular meshwork is a highly or naturally pigmented structure. So it gives an idea where the trabecular meshwork is, and also the higher the pigmentation, the closer the proximity to the collector channels. And through the blood is, there are two ways. One is the provocative gonioscopy, where when you apply pressure on the gonioscope, there will be force reflux of the blood into the Schlemm's canal. The other way is relative hypotony. You gently eject out the visco that you have used a bit, so that there will be relative hypotony, which causes blood reflux into the Schlemm's canal when there is an IOP drop. And the other way is, it has shown that tryptophan blue stain for less than 60 seconds will diffusely stain the trabecular meshwork. That can also give you an idea during surgery. So just to conclude, it has a high learning curve. So you will have to practice the procedures. The one thing which we can do is during routine cataract surgery, before you start the surgery, you can regularly practice doing the docking of the lens, the tilting of the microscope, and also the positioning of the head before you undertake the surgery, and step-by-step approach. So take each step first, like start with the gonioscopy, then start with the simpler procedures, then you can go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Vishwaraj. Nicely covered the art of gonioscopy. Now, I would like to invite Dr. Sunita Dubbe ma'am to present her talk on trabectome, her experience. Madam.
Thank you, Swati. I'll share my screen. So at the outset, I would like to thank Swati for giving me this opportunity. Can you see my screen?
Yes, madam.
Yeah, okay. So I'll be talking about trabectome technique and my experience. So we have been doing traditional surgeries like trab and tubes successfully over several decades. However, we know that they can be associated with sight-threatening complications like shallow AC, hypofiltration, and bleb-related endophthalmitis or blebitis. Makes being mostly conjunctival sparing maybe reasonably having high safety profile, and especially in patients with mild to moderate glaucomas, wherein we do not want to perform more invasive surgeries. So if you look at this management spectrum of glaucoma, MIGS are performed after utilizing the options of medication and laser. However, in mild to moderate cases, they can be even performed earlier when you are performing the cataract surgery, or if the patient is allergic or toxic to the medication, or cost or non-compliance is an issue. So in India now, we have started focusing on this group, the Schlemm's canal and trabecular bypass surgeries. And if you look at the anatomy, trabecular meshwork and inner wall of Schlemm's canal is the site of maximum resistance. So Schlemm's canal drains into 25 to 35 collector channels, which transmit aqueous to intrascleral and then to the episcleral venous plexus, and they are maximally concentrated on the nasal quadrant. Trabectome is a standalone device, and it utilizes a controlled plasma-mediated ablation system. And the advantage of trabectome system is that it has a constant infusion and aspiration, which helps to maintain the chamber and provides good visibility to facilitate ablation by removal of tissue debris and blood reflux. So I think this is very, very important, because when you're ablating, the visibility should be there and you should be able to visualize the tissue you are ablating. The foot plate provides and helps guide the electrosurgical tip and also protects adjacent tissue. So trabectome targets the site of maximum resistance and it achieves the complete removal of diseased trabecular meshwork and Schlemm's canal inner wall. As you can see, this is before surgery, pre-surgery and post-surgery. The trabecular meshwork and inner wall of Schlemm's canal has been removed. And since it's an excisional goniectomy and not incisional goniotomy, it minimizes the chances of risk of scarring and reocclusion of collector channels as the remaining edges of the TM are far apart. So it opens the Schlemm's canal to the collector channels. There are probes available, the Trabex and Trabex Plus. They are the laser cut serrated blades without irrigation and aspiration, and they are compatible with the phaco machine. So you don't need to buy the trabectome machine. You can just use phaco machine for the irrigation and aspiration with Trabex and Trabex Plus. So I'm just going to show the video. It can be combined with cataract surgery. In fact, the results of MIGS are better when combined with cataract surgery. So before starting the surgery, it is important to adjust the position of microscope and the head of the patient, as has nicely shown. And so before starting the surgery, it's very important to visualize the angle and the trabecular measure which you are going to treat. So it's important to do first gonioscopy before starting the procedure, and the incision is same as the phaco incision on the temporal side. Only thing, it is 1.8 millimeter, and this is the trabectome probe, and it is introduced across the anterior chamber, and the trabecular meshwork is engaged, as you can see here, and then start ablating from one side. And as you ablate, you can see iris falling back, and you can see this white line suggestive of the outer wall of Schlemm's canal. So you are going along the arch of the Schlemm's canal, and in a single sitting, you can treat almost 140 to 150 degrees of trabecular meshwork, and then you perform the phaco after doing the trabectome procedure in the usual manner. It's important to clean the blood, because there can be oozing of the blood from the treated side. So you can just do a lot of irrigation and aspiration and clear off the blood. So the advantage of combining the procedure is that by the time you have completed phaco, the blood, oozing of blood has already stopped. So this is just to show how you're going to engage it with minimal pressure, gently compress the trabecular meshwork and enter into the Schlemm's canal through the wrinkle in the meshwork, and then go along the arch and take out the middle third of the trabecular meshwork along with the inner wall of Schlemm's canal. So this is the kind of first MIGS procedure, and a lot of studies and literature is there. And this is the meta-analysis of first decade of trabectome surgery. Almost 4,700 surgeries were followed up for 90 months. And they included first 20 cases of surgeons with trabectome. And these were the survival criteria: IOP less than 21, at least 20% reduction in baseline IOP, and no additional glaucoma surgery. So 66% success in trabectome alone and 85% success in phacotrabectome alone. So it is quite effective, with reduction of 36% of intraocular pressure and decreasing in the number of medication by less than 1. Trabectome also works after failed trabeculectomy, and it's been seen that the higher the pressure, the more the reduction of intraocular pressure. So they compared again trabectome and phacotrabectome after the failed trab, and they found that there was reduction in intraocular pressure to a large extent from 24 to 16, and the number of medications also reduced as well. So collector channels do not completely atrophy after even in advanced glaucoma. So they also compared it with Ahmed valve and Barvelt valve, and they compared it by propensity score matching, and they found that the IOP reduction and the reduction in number of medications were almost similar in these studies. So we analyzed data of our 57 patients, and mean age was 48, although the age range was between 6 months to 80 years. And because I operated even congenital glaucomas and JOAG also, along with other diagnosis, including secondary glaucomas, and 35% of the patients had advanced glaucoma. 42% had a combined surgery, and 58% had trabectome alone. And there was a good reduction of intraocular pressure on day 1, and then at 6 months, from 48% at day 1 and 36% 6 months. And number of medications also reduced from 2.18 to 1.91. And we actually got better results in trabectome alone as compared to phacotrabectome, and could be because of the choice of cases. And when we performed trabectome alone, the IOP was really, so reduction was better. So these are some examples. It really works well in pseudoexfoliation glaucoma. This was one patient who had undergone phacotrab in one eye, and in this eye she underwent phacotrab, and this eye she had mild glaucoma, and she was on 2 medication. And phacotrabectome worked really well in her, with a reduction of intraocular pressure from 24 to 11. And in pigmentary glaucoma, this patient also underwent trab in one eye with very advanced glaucoma, with an overfiltering bleb and hypotony. And in the other eye, which has not much changes of optic nerve and visual fields, I performed trabectome, and you can see this disappearance of pigment at the site where the trabectome was performed, and that caused reduction of intraocular pressure. And this is, I also performed congenital glaucoma cases. This was one child who presented to us when she was 5 months old with bilateral primary congenital glaucoma. And she was operated, both eyes trab plus trab with mitomycin C. One eye did very well. The IOP was reduced and the corneal diameter and axial length stabilized. But in the left eye, the axial length kept increasing, and the corneal diameter also was increasing. So I decided to perform needling first in this particular patient, and after needling also the bleb didn't form well, and the IOP was not controlled. So I decided to do trabectome in this particular patient. You can see this bleb, and you can see this high insertion of iris, which is characteristic of congenital glaucoma. So the patient was under lighter anesthesia plane. So you can see this iris bulging forward. And with the ablation, you can see this white line. So the iris back, and the procedure was completed. So the patient did extremely well, and the corneal diameter was stabilized and axial length also. So the greatest advantage of MIGS is preservation of conjunctiva for more invasive glaucoma surgeries like trabeculectomy and tube implant can be performed later if required, and thus reducing bleb-related complications. However, we need more evidence to decide best treatment option for these patients. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. I have a few questions for you, ma'am.
Yeah.
How do you identify trabecular meshwork in children? Because as you showed in your video, they have high insertion and their angle is not properly developed. So it's very difficult to target the trabecular meshworks, ma'am? So,
yeah, actually in those cases, because there's high insertion and iris is inserted on the trabecular meshwork. So basically you have to engage at that point and basically you are incising it and the iris is falling back. So basically it is like goniotomy only, but when you do it with a knife, it is kind of incisional, incisional goniotomy. But when you're performing with this, it is excisional. So it is taking out the trabecular meshwork as well. So I have performed in 7-8 cases and the results were good. So basically you don't see the trabecular meshwork if it is high iris insertion, but you assume since it is inserted on the trabecular meshwork, so you have to target at that area.
May I ask a question?
Yes, sir, please, sir.
Yes, sir, sorry. Sorry to interrupt. And very, very interesting and very novel concept, Dr. Sunita. I think I really like the videos and the way you've deftly handled it. And I believe there are 2-3 types of these kind of probes. The one which used to come with the console, the older one, I guess, and now the one with IA and without IA. So what is your preference as far as the choice of this probe is concerned, the tip is concerned?
So we have, so there are 2 types. One is the machine itself, console with the probe. So with the inbuilt irrigation and aspiration. So we have the machine.
Okay, so, you have the machine.
Yeah, we
not
have
the FACO, not the FACO one.
No,
they're all different.
I have not, because we have the machine. That is why I'm using that, which has inbuilt INA. But you can do the Trabex and Trabex Plus also, and you can attach it to the FACO machine.
Yeah, they're actually giving me a demo next week or week after next once this lockdown business ends.
Yes.
And there's a choice between with IA and without IA. So is there what essentially is the difference? Is it comfortable to do it without IA?
No. IA you will use if you're using Trabex and Trabex Plus, and you will utilize IA of FACO machine. So in this procedure, you have to have an IA. Irrigation will be there. And because to maintain the anterior chamber, you have to use irrigation. It is not like a simple blade which is cutting and you're using viscoelastic.
It's not like a Kahook kind of blade.
It is not like a Kahook kind of blade. It has to be used with irrigation. So the advantage over Kahook blade, which I feel, although I have not used Kahook blade, is that when you're using any kind of blade, because in goniotomy sometimes it's bleeding and you're not able to see. Again and again you have to wash it.
Visualization is a problem, yes.
So here, because I have done almost 70 cases and it keeps, washing away the blood. So your visibility is very good. And if you're combining it with FACO, by the time you finish FACO, like in 10 minutes after that, the bleeding automatically stops. So, and when you're doing trabectome alone, then you have to wait for the bleeding to stop, because it takes a while for the bleeding to stop, because you have treated so much, almost 140 degrees of angle. So there has to be some bleeding and oozing from the collector channels. So to stop the bleeding, you have to actually, raise the pressure of the eye for some time. And then, so that way, I think it's a very easy procedure. Swati is going to tell you about GAT. So I think that's a difficult one.
The low cost one.
It's a very easy procedure, but it is expensive. So, but in Indian scenario, I think we have the answer to everything, that if you buy 5-6 probe and then ETO or plasma sterilize them, and then like a FACO,
reuse them, okay,
and just use them, reuse them 4-5 times, then it becomes cost effective.
Cost effective. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Madam, do you have any experience with narrow angles? I mean, like releasing the Sineke and then doing this?
Yeah, they say, I have done 1 or 2 patients whom I had performed iridotomy first, and then took the patient for trabectome. And they say, although they say that you should perform it before FACO, because after doing FACO, sometimes there's deposition of that material into the angle, so the visibility may not be so good. But if you're combining it with FACO, then you can first do the cataract surgery, and if the angle deepens, it is easier to do after angle closure, because I think people have been doing after angle closure also. So
thank you, madam. I think we'll relieve you. I think you're going for another talk, so we'll relieve you now.
Yeah,
because
sure.
you have finished your discussion part also. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am, for this wonderful talk. Now I'll be presenting my experience with GAT. So good evening, good afternoon, everyone. I'll be going to speak on GAT. I have no financial interest, and this is where we stand. So trabectum has been covered. I'm going to speak on GAT. Dr. Venkatesh will be speaking on BANG, and Dr. Murli Arika will be speaking on ECP. So instruments used for GAT are low temperature cautery, Swan-Jacob gonioprism, 50 Prolene suture, 15 degrees side port knife or a super shaft blade, cohesive viscoelastic, either you can use Healon GV or you can use Orogel, 25 gauge MVR blade, MST forceps, McPherson's forceps, and an indirect gonio lens. Coming on to the technique, I'll first show you an eye track GAT. So this is a surgery performed by Dr. Davinder Grover. Now he's injecting Healon GV into the anterior chamber, making a side port entry for the eye track catheter to be introduced. This is the eye track catheter. It has a lighted tip. After introducing into the anterior chamber, Swan-Jacob lens is placed. Limited goniotomy is done using an MVR blade, 25 gauge MVR blade. And then using MST forceps, the eye track microcatheter is introduced, and with gentle strokes, it is pushed inside the Schlemm's canal. And as you can see outside at the limbus, you can see the passage of the eye track catheter. When it appears at the other end, you have to grasp it with MST forceps again. And then from outside, you have to take it out using McPherson forceps. After creating almost 360 degrees goniotomy, take out the viscoelastic with irrigation aspiration. And then because we have postoperative hyphema, it is better to fill the anterior chamber with cohesive OVD. Now we come to a low cost method, which is the suture GAT. I'm blunting the tip of the 50 Prolene suture. Both the sides I blunt normally, so that if one side it is not going, I can use the other end of the suture. So this is a comparison to show whether to mushroom it or not more. So just mushroom it to make it blunt. Don't make it a big mushroom.
Swati, you can reduce the volume in your... Okay. Now you can talk.
Yes, sir. So I'm making the main incision in putting Healon GV, and mostly I use Orogel. It has got very good results. Now introducing the blunted tip of the 50 Prolene suture. It should direct towards the 9 o'clock position. If you're sitting at 3 o'clock, then the suture should be, then now I'm turning the head of the patient towards the opposite side and tilting the microscope towards me. As Vishwaraj has said, to get a proper view of the angle. Now with the dollop of OVD on the top of cornea, now I'm going to place the Swan-Jacob gonio lens, and how beautifully we can see the angle structures. Using an MVR blade, I'm going to give a nick into the trabecular meshwork. Now I'm exposing the posterior wall of the Schlemm's canal. So as you can see, it's the bare sclera behind it. After making a limited goniotomy, using MST forceps, I'll just introduce the suture into the Schlemm's canal, and with gentle strokes, I'll be making it go ahead. Initially, it will go very nicely, very smoothly, but once you reach the 180 degrees, that is just opposite to where you have started inserting, you will feel resistance in the passage of the suture. That is a good sign that you are in the right place, but you should not get carried away that I am in the right place. You should confirm the presence of Schlemm's canal, presence of suture in the Schlemm's canal using an indirect gonio lens, which I'll be showing just in a few seconds. So this is the indirect gonio lens, where you can see this blue color suture here, that is in the Schlemm's canal. So I'm rotating it to see whether how far it has reached, so I can show that it has reached up till here, and I have to still push it more. And then after passing 180 degrees, I have to really push it hard, and now you can see little bit blue hue on the other side, but it has still not appeared at the initial goniotomy side. So I'll keep on pushing it, gentle strokes, but with force after you pass 180 degrees. You should not put your too much pressure on the gonio lens, so that to avoid the corneal folds. So now you can see the suture has appeared at the other end. I'm grasping it with the MST forceps. I have to grasp above the suture which I have introduced, not below it. And then using a McPherson forceps from outside, I'll be tearing off the inner wall of Schlemm's canal. And your GAT is done. Then we have to do irrigation and aspiration to take away all the viscoelastic. I have done a phaco after that, and now I am filling the anterior chamber with Orogel. So you can have a 20% fill or a 40% fill depending upon the intra bleeding which you are encountering. So now I'll be coming on to the evidence. Grover et al. Has showed that GAT is a very promising technique, and they presented their preliminary results at 6 months follow-up, where they show that it is as promising as ab externotrabeculotomy. Then at 24 months follow-up also they presented their results, and they said that the long-term results of GAT are relatively equivalent to those previously reported for GAT as well as for ab externotrabeculotomies. Another study done by the same group said that even if there is a prior incisional surgery, glaucoma surgery done, GAT still gives a good results and significant decrease in IOP and required glaucoma medication at 24 months. So we have enough evidence to say that GAT works. My experience. So I had intraoperative challenges, but I learned that first stroke is the best stroke and I should keep things ready. Localizing the trabecular meshwork is little difficult in the initial phase, so you should do practice intra-gonioscopy like Vishwaraj said. Bleeding from the Schlemm's canal can be dealt with if you keep the head above the heart, and problem with suture advancements can be placed, and false passage you can encounter, or you can make a false passage if you have a very big mushroom to put the suture inside, and shallowing of the AC also. Now I'm going to give some tips to reduce the bleeding from the Schlemm's canal. What you can do: head above the heart, lift the head end of the operating table as shown in the table, as shown in the picture, and this reduces the reflux from the Schlemm's canal and the collector channels. Use high viscosity OVD, Helon GV or Orogel. Now, to avoid false passage, you should have a proper understanding of the anchor structures. You should not be aiming for the ciliary body band. You should be bang on the trabecular meshwork. You can use the intracameral pilocarpine and also blunt the tip of the mushroom just to blunt it. So on the right side, you can see a very big mushroom, which is capable of producing a false passage. And on the left-hand side, you can see just blunted tip. And confirm the suture presence in the Schlemm's canal by using indirect gonio lens, as you can see in the picture. Suture is not advancing beyond 180 degrees. So first confirm your suture is in Schlemm's canal, then try it to inside. You can introduce the suture from the opposite side also. And resistance at 180 degrees is a good sign actually. If you feel there is a shallowing of anterior chamber, use more Helon GV or Orogel and place the gonio lens gently over the cornea to avoid these Descemet's membrane folds. Post-operative complication most commonly is encountered is hyphema. So first row is the first patient which I had first day post-op, and he was like totally unhappy with the movements, with the vision, because he had hand movements vision. The second patient was lucky enough, he didn't have any much hyphema, and see, this is also first day post-op of a third patient, but this patient had a lot of hyphema and he ended up with the AC wash. So we do get surprises in GAT, and hyphema is one of the most commonly encountered complication. So tips: how to avoid hyphema. Preoperative counseling that you might have hyphema and that post-op visual recovery will be little delayed. Maybe say within 1 week you will get the vision. So patient will not have expectations at the first on the post-op day 1. So you have to discuss with the patient and the caregiver. Form the anterior chamber with Helon in the end and 30% fill or 40% fill depending upon the bleeding intraoperatively. And mostly it is self-resolving within the first week. Most of the hyphemas get cleared. You can also give pilocarpine BD for 7 days and also alpha agonist BD for 7 days. Now, if you have a false passage, you can have choroidal detachment. So don't worry, choroidal detachment, it has to be dealt with systemic steroids in tapering doses as well as topical steroids. This is a patient in whom I had a false passage. This is a POD1B scan, and at 15-day post-op, the choroidals had totally gone and the patient had 6/6 vision. My experience so far, I have done 27 eyes of 26 patients. The mean age is 62.4 years, ranges from 40 to 74 years. And we have POAG as 18 patients, 4 patients with normal tension glaucoma, 4 patients with pseudo-exfoliation glaucoma, 1 patient with angle recession glaucoma. And we followed the patient for average of 180 days, but we have some 8 to 10 patients with 1 year follow-up. So this is the baseline parameters. Well, I'll just go to the results. In terms of vision, we had 81% success rate, complete success. And the thing to be noticed that on first postoperative day, the visual acuity dropped because of hyphema, because 21 out of 27 eyes had microhyphema or layered hyphema on POD1, which cleared within 1 week. So at the end of 1 year, almost all the patients have got logMAR 0.45. In terms of IOP, we have on pre-op IOP was 24.7 millimeters of mercury, which improved from day 1. And at 1 year follow-up, the IOP was 6.18 plus minus 7.4 millimeters of mercury, which was statistically significant. In terms of anti-glaucoma medication, sorry, patients at 1 year follow-up, none of the patients, I mean, most of the patients, I would say, were off the medication. So it's a very reliable technique. Intraoperatively, sorry, I had to convert to twin sight in 2 patients, and I encountered shallow AC in 1 and false passage in 1 patient who had choroidal detachment on POD1. I encountered hypotony in 1 patient and IOP more than 21 millimeters of mercury in 4 patients. But hyphema was the most common complication, which resolved in 1 week. So my take-home messages will be the 10 commandments. Choose moderate open-angle glaucoma cases to start with widely open angles on gonioscopy. Do very good preoperative counseling. Practice intraop gonioscopy on routine phaco cases. Don't make large initial goniotomy, otherwise you will lose the suture and you will land up in making a false passage. Feed the suture into the Schlemm's canal, don't push it. And keep the head above the heart, table tilt, so that you don't encounter bleeding from the Schlemm's canal. Use liberal cohesive OVD and use indirect gonio lens to confirm the suture position, and be patient and perseverant. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Swati. Let's say that it's got locked at 280 or 300 degrees. Can you do another goniotomy and remove it, or you want to still complete it?
Sir, initially I had made a side port at 11 o'clock position. So if I am stuck at 180 and it's not proceeding, then I do make a side port to introduce the suture from 7 o'clock position. Then I'm opposite in the anti-clockwise direction, I push my suture. And then, or rather I would say in the clockwise direction, then I put my suture and push it and then confirm again whether it is in the Schlemm's canal and then complete it, sir. So it does come from the opposite side when I have done in twin site.
No, but let's say that it's covered 260, 270, no? And then it's a lot of resistance is there. Can you finish off there by doing another goniotomy and removing it?
Yes, sir. So what happened was, one case I had a 270 degrees passage, then I had to use the indirect gonio lens, identify the suture where it has reached, then make another side port at opposite direction, move a little bit inferior to the patient's, towards patient's legs. I had to sit there, and then I had to make a goniotomy there, and with the MST forceps, I had to retrieve the suture from there. So I have 180 degrees, 270 degrees, 300 degrees, 360 degrees. So it doesn't go always 360 degrees.
Yeah, that's important, because we cannot aim that it will come at the 350th degree to come outside on the other side. So you have to be kind of flexible to change your pattern when it gets stuck somewhere. Yes. And the other thing is, the other important tip which you said, I think it's very important. The suture should be above when you are holding it, right? Because you are pulling from the other side with your McPherson through the side port. So this suture should be held on top. If you hold below, then it can get locked.
So it will lock at 180 degrees exactly. Then you will have only 180 degrees goniotomy.
So these are some of the very, very important tips. Unless people start doing it, they may not recognize how important it is, keeping the head end on top. And because like what Sunita madam was also saying, that bleeding will be kind of so awkward sometimes, because you have to come out and then remove the bleeding, go back again. It will be a nightmare if you have a lot of blood coming out from Schlemm's canal. Murli, you have any question?
Yeah, very, very interesting and very innovative. I think you're really showing the way as far as low-cost treatments are concerned, and applicability to our scenario is concerned. I think it's very important, rather than going in for the imported costly catheters and so on. So I have one question. Maybe I have tried just a few patients alone, and suppose if I find that if I'm going through with this Prolene, And if I find that if I'm able to stop at 180, can I just pull it out at 180 and leave it like how we do for
Yes, sir.
goniotomy, trabeculotomy in children? Why not leave it at 180? What will happen with the
It
IOP?
will work. So Dr. Allen says that 180 also works.
Exactly. So in children, actually, we have started doing two-side trabeculotomies, in which I do one at one part, and another angle I go and do some other trabeculotomy. So it's the same principle, except that it's ab externo. So this is ab interno. So I think that's why I'm asking whether you have difficulty, why panic and sort of go search and make multiple incisions. You just come out by pulling out and leaving with the trabeculotomy, not like you said, 200, 300, whatever you can comfortably do.
Yes, sir. And so the benefit with eye track was you can see where it is blinking.
Illuminated tip, yeah, that's true. Yes.
So you know where your suture has reached, but in Prolene you have to use an indirect gonio lens. Then you can know where I have reached. So then only we can get an idea. Okay, I am 180 degrees, or I am 200 degrees, or 270 degrees, whatever the case may be.
Absolutely.
And only the other important thing is what Swati was saying. Even the cautery is so important. No,
yes,
if you make
bulbous,
it, very, very important. That is, if it is too like a mushroom, like the head which you are showing, then it doesn't fit into your canal.
Correct.
So that's again a place where when it comes 180, it can get locked there.
Maybe some company can take up making the Prolene tip perfectly manufactured to the bulbous round and smooth ended suture end, rather than our cauterizing it each time in a different way. Maybe some company can take it up and make the end perfectly round and bulbous.
No, it's a matter of convincing a company. It's very easy now for our lab to do.
For the volume we have in glaucoma.
Exactly. For people, they ask who are doing it.
Where is the cost and cost involved?
Even for XNet, when we developed the idea here, to get the kit done, we have to prove like tomorrow what is my market.
Correct. Absolutely.
Okay, so you need some users, and not they are ready to do even for a few users, but there should be a group like RD now has got a good market, right? So definitely, if people start doing MIGS and GARDs and the other technique which I'll be showing, I'm sure companies will be readily adapted to manufacture it.
Thank you, Swati. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So, anybody else has any questions to the speakers? So we'll move on to Dr. Venkatesh. Over to you, sir. And he will be talking on BANG, bent ab interno needle goniectomy.
I take this opportunity to thank my good friend and colleague, Dr. Swati, for conducting this excellent course on minimally invasive glaucoma surgery. So in the next few minutes, I'm going to talk about a very simple but an innovative technique called bent ab interno needle goniectomy, or the BANG, B-A-N-G. So enhancing the trabecular mesh flow outflow into the Schlemm's canal has been an active part, in blebless glaucoma surgery, or in surgeries where it is kind of bleb independent. And people were doing ab interno so that you don't scar the conjunctiva and you preserve the conjunctiva for future surgery. So we had trabectome for several years, and we have the implants like iStent and Hydrus implant. You saw an elegant way of using a suture or even an eye track catheter to do a gonioscopy assisted transluminal trabeculotomy. And what I'm going to talk about to you in the next few minutes is called the BANG, which is basically how you can do in a similar way like a Cahoop dual blade. So Cahoop dual blade is basically a dual blade which makes parallel incisions in trabecular meshwork and opens up the inner wall of Schlemm's canal. And it strips the trabecular meshwork under a gonioscopy view. So this is the dual blade. And what you see is the sharp tip of the dual blade. And then you have which easily penetrates the meshwork. And then the ramp which is there lifts and stretches the meshwork. And then the dual blade does its job. The upper and the lower half of the dual blade excise a strip of meshwork. And the foot plate kind of nicely settles on the back wall of the Schlemm's canal so that it doesn't cross the back wall. And the KDB is advanced to peel off the trabecular meshwork. And you can see how the KDB or the dual blade, the sharp tip enters into the Schlemm's canal. The ramp lifts it, and then the foot plate is falling on the back wall of the Schlemm's canal. And then the dual blade kinds of peels off the trabecular meshwork neatly. So you can do 2 clock hours on either side. So you maybe like 3 to 4 clock hours can be done. So there has been a lot of publications now with the Cahoog dual blade, the goniotomy with the single-use blade, and we have a lot of good information on the short-term results. So usually most of these techniques are combined with the cataract surgery, and they have found that there is the significant and sustained reduction of intraocular pressure, and also reduction in the number of glaucoma medications up to 6 months and 1 year. And even they have studied with and without cataract extraction, and the outcomes have been equally good. So they found that there is a favorable safety profile, and it is an effective procedure at reducing intraocular pressure and medication burden, either as a standalone or even combined with a cataract surgery. So what is BAG basically? This is a technique which was developed by Arsham Shabani, and this is a video borrowed from him, where you can see a 25 gauge hypodermic needle is used, and it is bent at a 90 degrees at the tip. So you bend it here at the tip, and you make this BAG needle. So you can't use something which is 24 gauge. It can be very huge for the trabecular meshwork. 25 is ideal. If you use 26, it may be too small for peeling of the trabecular meshwork. So ideally, it's a 25 gauge needle, and then you bend like this. Let's see how this technique is being done in combination with the cataract surgery here. And once you have finished your cataract surgery, and after the intraocular lens is implanted, the most important thing is to do intraoperative gonioscopy. So you have to practice how to do a nice intraoperative gonioscopy. So you have to tilt the microscope towards you, and the patient eye should be tilted away from the microscope. And you can see this is the bent needle. You identify the trabecular meshwork. You insert the sharp end into the Schlemm's canal, and then you gently peel off the trabecular meshwork, which is the inner wall of the Schlemm's canal. The outer wall is kind of supporting the bent needle. And if there is any small bleed from the Schlemm's canal, you can clear that off, like how you see here with viscoelastic. So basically, you have to nicely deepen the chamber with high molecular weight viscoelastics, preferably a Healon GV. And then after washing, you can see the blood ooze, which shows that the Schlemm's canal is open and there is a ooze of blood from the canal. And then carefully watch this aqueous veins here, the collector channel and the aqueous veins. And once the chamber is pressurized, you can see this nice blanching here. That shows that the natural outflow is enhanced here. You can see those nice blanching happening, the vessel which is being shown here. So once you reform the anterior chamber and increase the pressure, you can see a nice blanching happening. So that shows the enhanced outflow through the normal channels. So this is a very simple and a very innovative technique. And I would like to again take this opportunity to thank Dr.
Thank you, sir. Any more tips you want to give, sir?
I think, as you said, the head position again is very important, because this is also where you can have blood in Schlemm's canal, which can bother you. Again, you are opening up the channel. So very important to keep the head end elevated and the foot end, so your heart is below. And then it's good to use a good high molecular weight viscoelastic to nicely deepen the chamber. And at the end of the procedure also, it's good to pressurize the eye so that you don't have those high FEMAs the next day. To some extent, you can control, but definitely there may be high FEMAs, but not to that extent like your 360 goniotomy, right? Because there you have almost opened up 360 degrees. Here there are 3-4 clock hours. So you can expect a micro high FEMA, but not as bad as a card. So you can increase the pressure, a little bit of viscoelastic, maybe like what you said, 10 or 20% of viscoelastic inside the chamber, which will get absorbed, and because they are all open angles, and seems to be promising. And now for very mild to moderate, when you're going to combine with the cataract surgery, you can do this. I won't recommend this for patients with advanced glaucoma where you need a very good intraocular pressure control. It will not be a great technique, but definitely it will add on to somebody on one glaucoma medication. You want to get rid of it, do this also in addition to your cataract, because cataract itself reduces pressure. In addition to this, if you get some reduction, 10, 15, 20%, definitely it's going to make a big change in the life for the patient. They may be off the glaucoma medications post-operatively.
Yes, sir.
Do you have somebody supplying these 25G needles?
So we ordered in store. So they are saying that it comes from Delhi. So we have ordered.
So it's available in India. Okay.
Yes, sir, it's available.
Yeah, I'll send you the details, maybe in WhatsApp. Yeah.
Murli sir, it has got a light orange hub. So and it's good.
No, it's for the other audience who's listening in as well. So people may be wondering, but I have never seen a 25G needle. That's why I was asking.
It's available in India, sir. Yes.
So again, you can the same question can come. If you have users, we can bend and give the needle. You can have 2-3 needles. If it doesn't work, you can use another one like our XNIT kit. Where you have your right side and left side.
Absolutely.
Yes, there's not much. You just open the packet, use it, and throw it. Yeah.
Should I share my screen now?
Yes, sir. So now I invite Dr. Murli sir to give us talk on endocyclophotocoagulation, sir.
My sincere thanks to my good friend Dr. Swati, and of course the Arvind team and the AOS for giving us the platform to discuss the various aspects of MIGS in the Indian context. And I think the laser cyclodestruction, what I'm going to talk about, is actually nothing unusual or nothing new. So it's been around for quite some time now. And the intractable glaucomas are difficult glaucomas to handle, and we've had all types of post-trauma, neovascularization, FAK, and we have seen it all, post-PK, silicon oil related, limited vision potential, painful blindness, and so on. And traditionally, we have been doing cyclodestruction by doing cryotherapy, diathermy, and in the past, and we were doing the continuous wave diode laser for a very long time, transscleral. Sometimes the newer endoscopic techniques are also available. The new addition to the armamentarium of the glaucoma surgeon is the micropulse diode laser transscleral cyclodestruction. So the older one used to be called the G probe. I think you might have all seen this. The G probe has been around for quite some time. And we also have a G probe Illuminate also. The placement is sideways, and you can actually place it spot on multiple spot applications, and it's a wedge-shaped tip and so on. You place it circumferentially around the limbus, and it's a continuous wave laser. And I think I'm not going to describe too much about this. But the problems we used to have with the continuous wave diode CPC was the conjunctival burns, the iridocyclitis almost always, painful, hyphema, vitreous hemorrhage, hypotony, relatively common, choroidals, and very rarely even sympathetic ophthalmia has been reported with this continuous diode CPC. So we were not doing it in a predictable way in all patients, and we used to dread the thought of vision loss and complications. In seeing eyes, we would definitely not think of doing the continuous diode CPC. Whereas the newer one is the micropulse, uses micropulse technology, which denatures the target tissue and minimizes collateral damage. And the device actually applies a series of short repetitive bursts of energy, which is effectively confining the thermal effect with the absorbing tissue. And the probe is applied in a sweeping moment, unlike the previous spot application of the laser. The duty cycle is 31.3% with on of 0.5 milliseconds and off 1.1 milliseconds. 80 seconds each hemisphere, 2000 milliwatts is the power, and approximately for about 5 sweeps in each hemisphere. 5.5 sweeps is what we can time yourself to do. And I usually do it in the operation theater setting, because we need to give a peribulbar block. We need to have an anesthetist maybe as a standby, or some physician, because basically you're giving a block. And these are the settings which I have described to you, about 80 seconds and 2000 milliwatts. I'm going to show you a few case examples of where I found this useful in some of my patients. In very advanced primary angle closure glaucomas in young patients, even phakic patients with fairly good vision, we dread the thought of very, very shallow ACs and extremely narrow angles, occludable with extensive PAs, near advanced total cupping. We dread the fear of complications in these kind of patients, and patients sometimes when you explain, try to get an informed consent, they don't give their consent for surgery. When this particular patient was offered the option of the micropulse diode CPC, she readily agreed. And first I did one eye with caution, and this was many years ago. And subsequently, the result was so good that we did the other eye. This patient is now actually quite stable with 1 or 2 medications and continues to hold at the same level. And this is another patient with, again, with good vision, multiple medication, intolerant to most of the drugs you can think of, cannot tolerate, has severe hyperemia, and simply does not comply with whatever is given to her, stop using the medication. This is another patient whom we had offered this therapy, and it had worked well for her too, and now she's only on 1 medication. You see the discoloration around the eye and the severe intolerance to medication. This is another interesting patient, first who had a phacotrab. It scarred down, the pressure was very high, vision slowly started dropping, glaucoma was progressing, then we ended up doing a tube. The tube also worked well for some time. Again, the tube sort of fibrosed and again was not doing the job. The pressure again started going up. We had no option but to do something like a diode CPC, the micropulse diode CPC. And this has held the pressure now. And with advanced glaucoma like this, already treated with multiple options. And this was the only thing which you could do. And luckily for him, it has worked. Another patient with the Boston K-Pro, in which Boston K-Pro was actually done in both eyes. And you can see the tarsography also on one side. So this eye, apparently the disc was worsening, and the pressure we could not measure accurately, but we felt the glaucoma was worsening. So therefore, I did the micropulse CPC in one eye, and then with the encouraging result in one eye, I have done the other eye as well. So these are patients in whom you have no other option but to reduce the pressure with the controlled kind of micropulse CPC. The continuous wave transcranial CPC is destructive. These are pictures from Paul Chu, who has shown the pre and post TSCPC with the continuous wave and shows that the tissue shrinkage and cyclodestruction is very obvious. Whereas with the post micropulse, pre and post micropulse, you will find there is no detectable evidence of tissue damage. These are again images from Paul Chu's presentations, which shows that the visible damage is much less with the micropulse. So, but there are problems with the micropulse, not that it is all very nice and easy to do all the time. The cost and logistics is a problem. The probe only has a timed radio frequency probe in which you can use it only for about 90 minutes, and you have to pull together patients with a cost being high and so on. 2 patients have inflammation. There can be a vision loss with patients having good vision. You can have a vision loss of 1 or 2 lines, which is worrying because we don't have an explanation for the vision loss right now. People can remain dilated. In my initial patients, people used to get dilated. Now I don't get that problem. Epithelial haze, when you're getting too close to the limbus and probably damaging stem cells and so on. But complications, mind you, are very rare. I've hardly had anybody developing choroidals. I have not had anybody developing severe hypotony. All of it settles down with medical treatment. Nobody had any serious complications. But I would avoid treating thin areas where blood clots are there, immediate post-ops, active inflammation. I would not do it. A lot of papers and publications have come out recently in ophthalmology, Journal of Glaucoma, British Journal, a lot of publications. I'm sure if you Google, you will find all these articles. The essence of all these publications has been that the IOP reduction is quite good. You would get a mean reduction of about 30-35% in most patients. People who are using 3 to 4 drugs will end up reducing the number of drugs from 1 or 2 medications eventually. And we published our study recently on our initial Indian experience of about 55 eyes, the micropulse transscleral in refractory glaucoma. And it's very encouraging to find about a 30% drop in intraocular pressure in the short term. We are going to continue these patients and see what happens in the long run as well. So the mechanism of action of this particular method of treatment is supposed to be a subthreshold cell damage at the level of the pigmented epithelium with no visible scarring and reduced collateral damage, and induces ciliary muscle shortening, scleral spur rotation, trabecular meshwork movement, and Schlemm's canal changes that are supposed to improve aqueous outflow and reduce the intraocular pressure. It acts somewhat like the hypothesis of how pilocarpine would act by increasing the UV scleral outflow. I'm going to show you a short video clip of how you can do it with the speculum on. And in the average patient with a prominent eye and have a good space like this, you can actually do it with the speculum on. So this is the slow sweep. You do about 5 sweeps in about 80 seconds inferiorly. Try to avoid the 3 o'clock and the 9 o'clock as you are treating. The placement and the pressure which you apply should be, but the learning curve is only in that area. How much pressure to apply, how fast you can rotate, and where you place the probe. This is with the speculum on. And sometimes you will have difficulties. People have been using multiple medication. You will find tight palpable fissures. You're simply not able to insert a speculum and place the probe. There's one technique described which has been done like this. You can actually use the probe itself like a speculum to push apart the eyelids. Without pressure on the globe, you can actually do it without a speculum as well. So this is another method which I have learned recently that I can do. So take home message, micropulse CPC is a safe and effective alternative to continuous CPC in wherever you consider diode CPC. Can also be used in seeing eyes and not just intractable glaucomas, but vision loss is a problem and you must take informed consent and inform the patient as well. Will reduce the need for medication with very few complications, but you must avoid in recent post-ops and recent eyes with having severe inflammation or even mild inflammation. We definitely need longer term follow-up and we definitely need follow-up studies before we get much more information about the long-term effects. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. So I have a question. So we say that when we have exhausted everything, we will go for ECP, or like it's a very precious eye. But then ECP is also not devoid of any complication, major complication. So one patient we had with CRVO after the endocyclophotocoagulation. So we were wondering what might be the cause of it. So can severe inflammatory response be a cause of CRVO?
Definitely. I think the predictability of complications is we're still actually groping in the dark as far as so many things are concerned. I spoke about the micropulse transscleral CPC, not the endo CPC. And endoscopic, I do not have the endoscopic CPC. What I do is the transscleral application, which I showed in the video.
Yes,
and in inflamed eyes and eyes which are recovering from inflammation, it is said that a layer of fibrin or layer of inflammation covers the aspect of the so-called ciliary processes, and maybe the effectiveness of the cyclodestruction is less. So in inflammation or active inflammation or recently eyes recovered from inflammation, do not do it. Do not do this. In my hands, it probably works best after anti-VEGF, after PRP in neovascular glaucomas, works best in post-trabs and post-tubes when nothing else is an option. And also on severe angle closure glaucomas, when you dread that you're not going to get a good result with trabeclectomy, you dread the fear of malignant glaucoma and so on, you can offer it to patients as a choice. Post-silicon oil, and the best results I usually get is post-PK glaucomas. Post-PK glaucoma, the results are wonderful.
Where you don't want to put a tube and then cause a decompensation also to the contact.
That's right. Yes.
Only, I believe now the transclearance CPC, at least the cyclogesic, has made some change during the COVID time. Does it also change in your practice, or is it the same?
I think the Western group which promotes the CPC, the cyclogesic, has been saying that it's an office procedure, can be done in the outpatient without a visit to the theater and so on. But I think that probably does not apply to our scenario, in which we do even intravitreal injections and even our CPCs in the theater when we're giving a block. So giving a block and doing the procedure takes about 5 minutes. I think between you and me, I think trabeclectomy would probably take an extra 5 or 10 minutes. A phaco would take in a few more minutes. So I really don't think that this is a big difference as far as the COVID scenario is concerned. The more important concern would be the giving the block and monitoring the patient, ensuring a good block is given. If you don't give a good block,
it was more about avoiding an incisional surgery, where there was chance for bleeding and aerosols, where you had to test them or make sure they were not having COVID and things like that.
Yeah, but I don't really think it had made any difference to my way of practicing. During the complete lockdown, we were all totally locked up. We were not operating at all. We were not doing anything. Patients would not come. Now, when everybody is back, we're back to square one. We're doing the same thing as we were doing before. So I don't really think we have changed the way we are practicing as compared to earlier.
Okay. No, that's just I wanted.
So how would you grade the pain scale for a conventional diode CPC and a micropulse pain scale, like patients, from the patient's point of view?
I think definitely much less. I've been doing the earlier G-probe cyclophotocoagulation for ages, more than 10 years I was doing that. And it's extremely painful. We need to give a lot of reassurance, keep analgesic injections ready, and even to give a good block and maybe ensure that sensocaine is given along with the block. Wait for 5 to 10 minutes for the block to take up well, and then do it cautiously. Whereas with this, I think we're a little more I think definitely on a pain scale, if you look at the pain scale, it will be definitely much less. But anyway, we prime the patient that there could be pain, and we, depending on the patient's comfort, we put post-operative steroids, as well as even consider cycloplegia or homatropine, or some cycloplegic is definitely necessary at least on day 1 and the next few days after the treatment. So you are hitting the ciliary body directly.
Yes, sir. So would you do it in a subtenous anesthesia, micropulse?
No, I have always done it peribulbar. So I don't do much of subtenous. I either do topical surgeries or I do peribulbar. I don't do subtenous.
So, but can we do in subtenous?
I'm sure you can do. There's no reason why you should not be able to do it. And given the safety of subtenous as compared to peribulbar, I think in a large institution where you fear that you're going to have globe perforation with the peribulbar blocks and retrobulbar injections, I think peribulbar is safety-wise. I think even in the UK, people say that peribulbar is contraindicated in ophthalmic surgery and so on. So in that scenario and in your scenario where you have a large institution with many people giving injections, the safety of the eyeball is definitely safer with the subtenon as compared to peribulbar.
And so myopic patients where we have already exhausted
absolutely yes
medical management. Correct. And we are scared to put a tube. So just to buy some time or just to give benefit, we send like for micropulse, we consider for micropulse. So correct. We cannot do transscleral CPC in a myopic patient because that might lead to scleral thinning, or we don't know, sir. But micropulse in your hands is safe in myopic eyes, sir?
Yes, I have done quite a few high myopes, and only thing is I just make sure that we don't have thin ectatic areas. We also make sure that we don't have anterior staphylomas and areas where already been previously operated. And you also find, suppose they had multiple VR surgeries and they have sclerotomy sites where yes. the thin areas are going to be there. All those areas you must consciously mark with a pen and avoid those areas.
Okay, sir.
Otherwise, you will end up completely thinning out those areas.
And so how many patients do you pool in for one set?
That's a trade secret. So we can't give away all those trade secrets. Right, what actually happens is, given the nature of the probe and the way the company behaves, I think it makes logical sense to have at least 3 patients. I can give you a minimum number. Okay, without 3, it does not make sense to do it. We have gone as high as 11 in one particular group of patients. We have done 11 in whom we added some community ophthalm patients whom we did not want to charge. So we added those kind of patients. So the maximum I've done is 11. The minimum worth it is about 3. But I find that it works best in the first few patients. Suppose you have a one-eyed patient and you want to prioritize, you would probably put that patient first ahead of the list. And the ones whom you have, say, lesser prognosis and you don't mind not having a great result, you can probably put them down the list, like how you would categorize your one-eyed versus somebody who is that kind of prioritizing you can do. But beyond the 5th patient, I believe it doesn't work so well. So 3 to 5 would optimum. You can go maximum depending on your logistics.
Right. Thank you so much, sir.
No, this experience is important. I think we should stop at some point so that, even if you're doing it for an intractable case without visual potential, still you may have some effect.
I usually now I stop at the 4th or the 5th. I never go beyond 5 now.
Let's say that 5. Morali's gut says it's 5. Yes, I see Madhu Madam there. Madhu Madam, do you have any questions to any of the speakers before we have some time before we close the session? Okay, Swati, I think Madam is not there. Probably you can close.
Amit sir is there.
I can see, ma'am, I can see one question here. I'll just read it. JP, what is the 1 T-year result of bank? That is a question that has been placed here. 1 T-year result of bank.
1 year result, huh?
Yeah.
of bang.
Bang.
Okay. So
The question is 1 year result of your GAT.
GAT.
GAT. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Sir, 1 year results, few of my patients, like if I would say 27 patients I've operated, 25 are off the medication and IOP is in 12s and 13s. This is the true figure which I'm giving you.
So 1 year, there are few patients in that who have completed 1 year, you said, right? You don't know the exact number.
Yes, sir.
Probably
Yes,
50% of them would have completed 1 year.
Yes, sir. More than 50% have completed 1 year, and most of them, they are off the medication. But
that's important.
Yes, sir. And if it was like they were already on 1 or 2 medications, so I think GAT can take care of 2 medications, sir. So those patients who are on 3, they are on 1 now.
Nice.
So,
okay, Swati.
We have some more time.
Yeah, you have another 10
minutes. We have 15 more minutes. So, can I just put a question to Swati?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Swati, for all the comprehensive ophthalmologists who are attending your course, who want to be updated, to start practicing GAT, what would be your initial message for them? How do they start practicing gonioscopy? That would be an ideal. So the tips and tricks to start practicing a direct gonioscopy so that they can do GAT in the future.
First of all, they need a Swan-Jacob gonio prism, sir. So first requisite is a prism, gonio lens. So gonio lens if you have, and then you have been doing cataract surgery. So just you have to sit on the temporal side. If you're doing an SICS, if the residents are doing SICS, just ask them, they have to just shift to the temporal side, move the patient's head away from them, tilt the microscope. So you have to have a tiltable microscope. It cannot be done on non-tiltable microscope. So you have to go at a higher end microscope. If it is tiltable, you have to tilt the microscope 45 degrees towards yourself. So sit on the temporal side, tilt the patients away from you, microscope towards you. Now, when this is done, and adjust your stool height also so that your patient lies at your chest level. Okay. After that, you should have Healon GV, or Healon GV is actually difficult to procure. So get Orogel. Orogel is cheap. It is a cheaper alternative to Healon GV, but has got excellent results, excellent visibility. So put $1 or one bolus of OVD on top of the cornea. Put your gonio lens. So if you are a left-handed person, there are left-handed person, then there are right-handed lenses. If you are a right-hand dominant person, there are left-handed lenses. So depending upon which handed you are, you have to buy that lens. So it comes in 2 varieties, right-handed and left-handed. So I am a right-handed person, so I have a left-handed Swan-Jacob gonio lens. So I put it on the cornea, and if I'm not getting a view, I'll just manipulate the patient's head. So I'll tilt even more. But if you tilt too much, then also you will not get a view. If you tilt too less, you will also not get a view. So you have to practice. That practice has to come, that what angle is suitable for you, your height and your microscope, that you can see bang on the angle. Then you don't have to do anything. And then when you have done this a couple of times, say 15 or 20 patients intraop gonioscopy, then try the maneuvering inside the anterior chamber. So when we make a phaco incision at the temporal side, through the same incision, introduce just a cannula and just touch the trabecular meshwork. Don't go with a very sharp blade or anything which is going to hurt or cause damage to the trabecular meshwork, because we are just practicing. So just go with a fine cannula which we use for injecting saline. Just go with that cannula, touch the trabecular meshwork and just analyze. Okay, I would have seen this on the slit lamp. Now I'm seeing under the microscope. So so if you just do that, you will have a knack of it, that how my hand is going to move when I'm doing a bang. So start with bang. If you are confident with bang, set to 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock as you have done bang, then you can go in for a GAT. And GAT definitely.
So any point on magnification, because that's important, right? You want to zoom up too much, or what?
So for intraop gonioscopy, start with the lower magnification, then little bit zoom up. You are bang onto the trabecular meshwork, and when you are maneuvering into the trabecular meshwork, then you have to go to the maximum magnification. But because the problem is with maximum magnification, you will have less field of view. So you will not see where your instrument is hitting, where your side port knife is going, So you make yourself comfortable. Once you are inside the anterior chamber with the cannula, then magnify it to the extreme.
Swati, how many clock hours in one go when you enter, you are able to do it? Because when we tried it, I mean, I've been trying to do this. On a low magnification, we get the opposite quadrant. But how many clock hours you are able to touch the trabecular meshwork? It's, for me, it is not more than 2 clock hours or maximum 3 clock hours.
Sir, we for the first goniotomy which we make should be just 1 or 1.5 clock hours, sir. So because if you open it too much, the suture will be coming out again and again. So just make it so that you have it opening, and then through that opening you have to put. If it is totally open, the suture will just come out. So you make a small opening, then you put the suture inside, and then you can see, sir, and you should see that it is going, and the bluish tint in the trabecular meshwork will guide you. And so that indirect gonio lens which I showed, need not buy that. I got it from US as a disposable gonio lens they use over there, and just throw it. But what the Goldman application, the Goldman lens we use in the OPD, that you can ETO it and keep it. Single mirror also and double mirror also, whatever is possible. Then you can use it intraoperatively. So you don't have to go in for a different gonio lens for indirect visualization. But it has changed my life so much, and now I am more confident whether my suture is inside the Schlemm's canal or it's just wandering away in the suprachoroidal space.
Thank you, Swati.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, Swati, I think you can close.
I thank All India Institute of All India Ophthalmological Society, the scientific committee of AIOC, and Dr. Amit, Dr. Partha sir, Dr. Chandrima Paul madam, and all my speakers, eminent speakers, Murli sir, Sunita ma'am, Venkatesh sir, and Vishwaraj. Thank you so much for giving this opportunity to present this instruction course. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you, Swati. And I think the AOS team has been wonderful. And I think you can see Amit sitting right through all the sessions of the subspecialty day, and as well as all the sessions. I think you are right there, and it's so reassuring to have the support of the AOS right through. Amazing conference, and thank you all.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Swapnila.
Thank you all.